Well, thank you for joining me for this segment of In Conversation. Today, I have the opportunity to talk with someone who in so many ways needs no introduction at all. Someone who's lived on 2 continents, someone who's known literally around the world, someone who became known to the world because of his great sense of comedic timing, but I think someone the world appreciates for his understanding of humanity. Trevor Noah, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to see you.
And it's great to be socially distanced, but in the same room. It's a wonderful day. This is a week that every year in New York in September is an important week, the UN General Assembly, but this is a UN General Assembly like no other. It's mostly virtual, but it's also a special anniversary. This is the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. As we look back and look forward, I was struck by something you said very recently. You were interviewed in the Wall Street Journal, and you said you have the mind of a pessimist, but the soul of an optimist. Looking back at 3/4 of a century and looking forward, do you think the world is better off or worse off than when the United Nations was created 75 years ago?
Well, I always think the world is better off. I know it may not feel like it in a moment, but I think we steadily move forward as human beings and as a species. We have setbacks. We have moments that we really shouldn't have had. We have moments that we really wish we could delete from, history and time and just bridge the gap to the more progressive moments or moments where society moved forward. But I think we always are doing better. The challenge is how to not just move forward constantly, but I think cement the progress that we do make. And so to borrow from the world of computing and technology, computers are always getting better. Our processing power is always increasing. Things are always becoming more accessible. I mean, you look at 70 years ago, people didn't have access to technologies that today an individual can just have in the palm of their hand. And I think things like that democratize information, they democratize how society can advance, they democratize how people can communicate. The downsides are that it also gives society an opportunity, unfortunately, to undo all of the things that we've done to get us forward. And so I always believe that we're in a better place. I just think that we have to always remember that the better place is always relative to if you've been in the previous place. And so it's one thing, some people say, well, look at what life was like 200 years ago. You go like, yes, but we weren't there. So we can't grade ourselves by the standards of 200 years ago. We have to grade ourselves by today's standards. And hopefully our children will grade themselves differently and their children will do the same. And hopefully their children will do the same.
Every year is important to people, to individuals or families or countries. And yet some years, I think, stand out as more important to the world historically. When you look back at 1945, when the UN was founded, it set in motion a lot of work to really think about the rights of people. It set in motion work to create the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, which was finished in 1948. And that's a declaration that called not just for equal rights for people, but equal dignity for people. Here it is, it's 2020. If ever there was a year that I think is causing us to step back and think about equal dignity, it is 2020.
Definitely.
When you think, you talk with so many people on your show, you get the opportunity to listen to them. What do you hope that we will take away in the year 2020 to advance the cause of equal dignity for people?
It's an interesting question, Brett, that I've really tried to ponder during this time. And I know I don't have the answer. But in my ponderings, I've stumbled across 2 ideas that stick in my mind. Number one, when we think of equal dignity, we have to ask ourselves what we wish for ourselves to exist as human beings and why we don't wish for those things to apply to other human beings. And I think 2020 has truly, truly put a spotlight on that concept and that idea, is looking at our fellow man and woman and saying, is this how we should live? And so the second part of it actually answers the first part, and that is we live in a year where the world has stopped like never before. We live in a time when the whole world is going through the same thing. That has never happened in human history, where a person in South Korea can talk to somebody in Russia who can talk to somebody in South Africa and in Kenya and in Senegal and in Brazil and in Japan and in the United States and in Canada. And everyone can say, coronavirus, everyone can say, this is something we are experiencing. I don't think that's ever happened before in history. And what I hope we will take away from that is the answer to that question, and that is, what do we want for others now, knowing that we've experienced it to a certain measure ourselves? So many people have gone, I have no money because I lost my job because of a virus. What do I do? How do I eat? And so many governments around the world, from France to the United States to the United Kingdom, have gone, well, then the governments have to step in and do something to ensure that people do not starve because their work has been taken away. And I always think, why don't we ask ourselves that question when there isn't a coronavirus? Why does anybody deserve to starve because their work gets taken away? I don't think anybody wants their work to be taken away. And so in many ways, the whole world is experiencing what it is like to have your work taken away. The whole world is experiencing what it is like to be restricted in your movements. The whole world is experiencing what it is like to not be able to make contact with the people that you love and be with them. And so I think of that, and I think of like a refugee or somebody who's stranded between borders somewhere in the world. And I think to myself, they have been living through 2020 for decades. And so many of us have been in a privileged position where we don't have to think of that, and we don't think it's that urgent. And so we work with a certain pace. And yet when the whole world is in that situation, we truly come to understand why that dignity is so important, why it's so important to afford other human beings the ability to live a life that humans wish to live. And I hope that's something we take from 2020. I hope that once this is over, we're able to look back at people who aren't in the positions we're in and say, man, remember when we were all in a similar position? Why did we act so quickly? And why did we work together to get things done? Because we were all feeling it. Well, maybe now we will take that feeling we had from 2020 and apply it to every decade that follows.
That breadth of perspective, I think that empathy for other people that you're describing here, is something I think the world has come to appreciate about you and the role that you play. And one of the things that I've really appreciated about you is you decided relatively early that you were going to take some of your good fortune and commit it to philanthropy. And you could have chosen to do that work anywhere in the world. You could have chosen any issue under the sun to pursue. And you chose supporting education in your native South Africa through the Trevor Noah Foundation. Can you tell us a little bit about what led you to make that choice and commit your energy and some of your money there?
Two reasons. One, because my work brought me to the US. I'm in the US. I live as a taxpayer in the US. And I've always been proud to be a taxpayer because I think people forget that the only way society can work is if everybody is chipping in their fair share so that you can have roads, so that you can have parks, so that you can have schools, so that. I think a lot of people have forgotten that, to be honest. And so people have started to see tax as a punishment. I've always seen tax as a privilege. My mother always used to say to me as a child, and maybe it's from religion and from the Bible, she would say, to be able to give is the greatest blessing because it shows you that you have. You truly know that you have when you're able to give. And so I don't deny that I have in a way that I never had, that my family never had, that my community never had. And so as much as I've enjoyed these things, I've always had, a voice in my head that says, don't forget that you are lucky. Yes, you worked hard. Yes, you got to where you hoped to get to, but you are lucky as well. Luck is one of those factors that we just do not have power over. And so the Trevor Noah Foundation was my small way of trying to step into a field that I believe increases your likelihood of experiencing luck, and that is education. Getting into a field where kids are left behind when they don't need to be. Kids are not given the resources to be able to become the future leaders that we need them to be tomorrow. And if I look at South Africa, one of the things that I read time and time again in our history is whether it was Nelson Mandela or Thabo Mbeki or Amit Kathrada or so many other leaders, one thing that they had in common was education. And that is while they were fighting for the freedom of the country, they were also fighting for the freedom of their minds. And they were working to educate themselves because they knew at some point, if they were handed the reins of the country that they had fought for, they would have to know how to manage that same country. And without education, you can't do it. And I think that's something that I've never taken for granted is kids of today are told to be the leaders of tomorrow, but they're not given the tools. And then when those kids grow up to to become people who don't want to or cannot lead, they're then judged. But it has to start somewhere. And one of the greatest tools my mom gave me was learning. She always made sure I had a book in my hands. She always made sure I could go to the best possible school that we could go to. We didn't live a fancy life. We never had new couches. We never had a brand new car. But she said, I will make sure you have food in your belly and I'll give you books to read. And so that's what the Trevor Noah Foundation works on, is trying to fulfill that idea of getting to schools in South Africa. And we started in the US as well, and figuring out how we can just bridge the gap between what a school needs and their ability to be successful and to create successful human beings. And oftentimes it's small. You know this better than anyone. There's a school with great teachers and great learners. There's the internet. What they just don't have is a connection and the tools to get there. And you give that to them. And through that success, what we do is try then go to the government and say, look, we can't scale this up on our own. I never think philanthropy is the solution. I think philanthropy is a great tool to help you discover solutions at a faster rate than governments around the world. And so what we try and do is engage with the South African government and say, hey, look at what we've learned. This is something that can make a huge difference for not a lot of money, not a lot of effort, not a lot of time. And you can have an amazing, amazing response from not just the teachers and the learners, but the country as a whole. And so that's why I got into this field, because I honestly believe, hands down, education is truly the one key that can help you unlock any door.
Now, you've been working on this for a couple of years, which is still very early. It's like a startup in the world of anything, including
Definitely.
philanthropy. But 2 years in, are there things that have surprised you? Are there lessons you're learning that inspire you to take the next step?
Definitely. What has inspired me? Realizing how much kids want to learn. People have so many ideas about children. You take for granted that their minds are designed like a sponge. They want to absorb information. If you give it to them, 9 times out of 10, they absorb it. They want to work on a computer. They want to become the technology leaders of tomorrow. They want to build the future. And it's inspiring to see that. I always even had the idea of myself as a kid. I didn't want to go to school. That's not true. I didn't like the way I was being taught in school. But there were some teachers and there were some classes that I was dying to get to. And I think that's something I've learned on the ground, is that these kids are inspired and they want to be a part of their own education. The second thing I've learned is how the smallest things can make the biggest differences. Giving kids a meal, if they did not have access to a meal, exponentially increases their ability to learn. The kid is not rowdy. The kid is not sleepy. The kid is not disinterested. They're hungry. They cannot function when they're hungry. And those are small things that you start learning, small little changes. Giving kids therapy, something that I know I never really had in school. Many schools don't even think about today, but just having a place and a space where kids can talk to somebody. Because I think when we came in, we thought we could solve all of these kids' problems. We very quickly realized that in order to solve the child's problems, you'd have to solve their parents' problems, but then you'd have to solve the community's problems, which is almost impossible. But what you can do, and as a big part of therapy, is you can just listen. And we were amazed at how listening to a child or having a professional who was there to listen to them helped them deal with the world they were in. And all of a sudden, their grades would improve, their attitude would improve, and their lives would improve. And so the inspirations and the lessons I've taken from engaging in education, even in the world of the startup, as you say, is that oftentimes we lead ourselves to believe that there's a mountain blocking us from progress. And if we just took a moment to scan what was happening, we'd realize there's a little path around that mountain that can get us to where we need to go. And so all we're trying to do at the Trevor Noah Foundation is discover those paths that get us around the mountain to where we need to be on the other side.
Well, one part of that path that I've had the chance to see, that we've had the chance to work with you from Microsoft's perspective is technology. Whether it's technology at the New Nation School, one of the things I've come to appreciate is how deep into technology you really are, whether it's the technology that you use for your show, even producing it at home in 2020, the technology that you like to use in some of your spare time for gaming, the technology that you've worked with us on at Microsoft, from the upcoming Xbox console to things like our new hardware devices. I don't think the world fully appreciates just how much you know about technology. But when you think about where the world is going, do you have thoughts about where you think technology can best go to either make the world better or at least avoid making it a more difficult place?
Definitely. I have always been amazed at how technology is, in many ways, human beings, it's our cheat code to life. You know, I always think humans have used technology to outsource their evolution. We've been able to take leaps and bounds that no other species has because we figured out that we can do it outside of our bodies. The wonderful gift that that's given us is that we can do, see, experience, be, and not be in places that we never could because of technology. You know, whether it's farmers in Kenya who have learned how to manage their crops and communicate with farmers, not just in Kenya, but around the world, and figure out how to increase their yield. Just regular subsistence farmers or farmers who are feeding their communities using technology. Whether it's teachers who have now been able to teach students that they aren't in the same school with, that's technology. You know, kids who are able to learn from home, that's technology. All these tools that we take for granted are technology. And so for me, from the very first time my mother gave me a computer, I'll never forget, you know, running DOS, just a very early version of it was just me and my command prompt. And the world opens up. You know, the first time you run a spreadsheet, the first time you create a resume, the first time you type a letter, the first time you do anything that for so long you weren't able to do, you realize how powerful technology is. And so for me, that's one of my dreams, is getting people all across the globe connected not just to technology, but to the web that connects them to the rest of the technologies. Because as we've seen in India, in South Africa, all across Africa really, and in South America as well, if you give people these technologies, not only do they create their future, but they create futures that you didn't even anticipate. They start solving their own problems. They start inventing new ways to do things that you could have never thought of because of the way you live your life. And you come to realize that technology is really a tool. Mm-hmm. That's all it is. It's a powerful, powerful tool. And so any tool can make the world a better place. The thing we always have to be careful of, and you and I talk about this all the time, is what can be used within that tool. A hammer can be used to build. A hammer can be used to break. And so that's why I chat to you about this all the time. I chat about it on the show. If we're not careful about how social media companies are regulated, and I say this to every leader who may be watching this thing or everyone who's engaging this, be careful, because it can become the downfall of humankind. We have access to more information than ever before, which also means we have more access to disinformation than ever before. And because of that, we can live in a world very quickly where there is no shared truth. And without a truth, there is no society, because that's all a society is human beings agreeing that there is one common thread or one common set of ideas that ties us together. And once we lose that, we lose everything we've built. So I'm a huge fan of progress. I'm a huge fan of technology going forward, but I'm also a huge advocate of the ethical implementation of technology, understanding how it's hurting people, understanding how it can be used to hurt people, and then even using technology to fix those problems and go like, hey, just like anybody would test a medicine, just like anybody would test a car, just like anybody would test anything that a consumer uses, technology should have those same ideas of testing itself and realizing when it is or isn't safe for the general population to improve their lives.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting segue to one last topic I wanted to ask you about. When we think back to 1945, I think perhaps the people who founded the UN imagined that they had seen one pinnacle of how technology could be used, namely to destroy humanity. Right. They had seen 2 atomic bombs dropped just in the preceding months. Here it is 75 years later, as you point out, we see technology being used in so many ways, for good and for bad. And ultimately, it's a reminder that it does come back to the values of people. And as we look ahead, because I think on a 75th anniversary, you can imagine what will it be like at the UN's 100th anniversary.
Right.
You've made a really, I think, important point recently. You said that, we sometimes suffer societally from zero-sum politics. It's as if, people think that in order to get ahead, somebody else needs to lose.
Right.
That was not the vision of the UN's founders 75 years ago. Any thoughts about how we can sort of break that paradigm and really change that mindset over the next 25 years societally?
I wrestle with this idea all the time. In America, I know that a 2-party system doesn't help. If you have only 2 political parties, you're inevitably going to be in a place where everyone has to pick a side that is automatically pitted against the other. You know, if you had two sports teams, the league would constantly be in riots. You know, and I think that's something that Americans, and especially when I talk to Americans, I go, nothing in life is just two choices. I think human beings are far more nuanced than anybody will give them credit for. You know, I don't think that everybody just falls into one bucket, because I know I don't. I know that you don't. I think when as human beings, we connect through politics first, we'll always find a reason to not get along. When as human beings, we connect through the things that connect us as human beings, we start to understand who we are. We start to understand who the other person is. And then I think from that place, we can start to build a more equitable society that isn't divided. Yes, we're always going to disagree. But I think an ideal world for me is a world where we're disagreeing on how to get where we're going, not on where we're going. Mm-hmm. And so as we work in the world going forward, I think we have to look at why politics is the way it is. America is different to many countries in the world. But when I look at the world, I think people take for granted, they really do take for granted, Brad, how much the internet is shaping our minds, even in ways that we don't know. Mm-hmm. We are passively being programmed to think a certain way. If you are constantly being given images of me as Trevor throwing eggs at your house, you're going to hate me as Trevor. As Brad, you're going to sit there and you're going to go, I hate Trevor so much. But you might find that I'm not throwing the eggs. You might find this is one image that you're getting sent repeatedly. You might find that this algorithm, and that's the thing. Oftentimes there's no evil person behind it. It's just the algorithm that gets to the point where it's so good, it'll do what it does best, which is forcing you to engage. If we allow these systems to grow unchecked, if we allow this technology to spread the way it has without holding those who create it accountable, we could very quickly end up in a world where everyone believes that in order for me to win, you have to lose. And that's not how nature works. That's not how human beings should work. That's not a sustainable way for us to exist, because in the end, it will mean, as you say, it's a zero-sum game, and I can only exist if you do not. And that's not how we are. And, you know, in South Africa, we have so many beautiful sayings I grew up with that illustrate that point. And I mean, one of the easiest ones was just like, izandla ziyagezana, which means hands wash each other. You know, and it was just a simple thing I grew up knowing, that I need this hand to wash this hand, and this hand washes this hand. No hand washes itself. Each hand is washing the other. And so if one hand says to the other, I don't need you, you may not need that hand for now, but very quickly you'll realize that without that other hand, you're getting really dirty, and then you're going to have to get chopped off. And so I think that's the one thing I hope we understand in society, is that time and time again, you think it's another person, but really you're just looking at a different version of yourself. You just didn't happen to take the path that got you to that place.
Well, I think that's good food for thought for all of us. I think hands wash each other. I think hands need to hold each other.
Definitely.
And as we look to the next 25 years, we have a lot of challenges. We have a lot of work to do. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with us and for offering, I think, some inspiration. This is a year when we could use it. So thank you for joining us. Trevor Noah.
Thank you very much, Brad.